The doctor's hands were shaking when he slipped me the note. I sat in that sterile examination room, the paper crinkling between my fingers, and read the 4 words that would change everything. Leave your family now. Dr. Lawson wouldn't meet my eyes. 20 years he'd been my physician, and I'd never seen him look so afraid. He busied himself with his clipboard, scribbling notes that probably said nothing at all, his pen making scratching sounds against the paper that seemed too loud in the quiet room. The fluorescent lights hummed above us, casting harsh shadows across his face that made him look 10 years older. "Henry," I said, my voice steady, despite the ice spreading through my chest. "What does this mean?" He glanced at the door like someone might be listening. The Venetian blinds were closed, but I could see his reflection in the metal cabinet, distorted and anxious. His white coat looked rumpled, like he'd been wearing it for days. "I can't say more, Mara. Just trust me. Please." I folded the note and tucked it into my purse, right next to the grocery list I'd written that morning. Milk, eggs, bread, dish soap. Normal things for a normal life that was apparently falling apart. The note felt like it weighed 10 pounds, burning against my hip through the leather. "The tests," I pressed, leaning forward in my chair. "What did they show? You called me in here urgently. Something's wrong." "I'm running more tests," he said, finally meeting my gaze. His eyes were tired, with dark circles beneath them that I'd never noticed before. Tiny red veins webbed across the whites of his eyes. "Come back on Friday. Don't tell anyone you're coming. Not your son, not his wife, no one. Can you do that for me?" Before we continue, we ask you to subscribe and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We would like to get to know our audience better. A cold feeling settled in my gut, heavy and nauseating. "Henry, you're scaring me." "Good," he said quietly, setting down his pen with a click that seemed too loud. "You should be scared." I drove home in a daze, the September sun too bright against the windshield. The note burned in my purse like evidence of a crime I didn't understand. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as I tried to make sense of what just happened. The radio was playing some cheerful pop song that felt obscene given the circumstances. I reached over and shut it off, needing silence to think. Leave your family now. I'd spent 32 years raising Richard, worked double shifts at the diner when his father left us, put myself through hell to make sure he had everything he needed. College, a good start in life, a mother who'd walk through fire for him. I'd missed birthdays, holidays, sleep, all to give him opportunities I never had. Sacrificed my youth, my health, my own dreams so he could have his. And now a doctor I'd trusted for 2 decades was telling me to run from him. The house looked the same as always when I pulled into the driveway. White siding that needed a fresh coat of paint, black shutters, the garden I'd planted last spring finally coming into its own with late summer blooms. Marigolds, petunias, zinnias in brilliant colors. Home. Except it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a trap, like something was waiting inside for me. Something dangerous. I'd been sick for months. At first, I blamed it on age. I was 58 after all, and bodies wear down. The headaches came first, dull and persistent, settling behind my eyes like storm clouds that never broke. Then, the nausea, the way food tasted wrong, metallic and bitter, like I was chewing on pennies. The exhaustion that made climbing stairs feel like scaling mountains, that left me breathless and weak. My hands trembled constantly now, making it hard to carry plates at work. "Just getting old, Mom," Richard had said when I mentioned it. He barely looked up from his phone, scrolling through something that held his attention more than his mother's health. His fingers moved across the screen in quick, impatient swipes. Nicole, his wife, had smiled that thin smile of hers. "Maybe you should rest more. You work too hard for someone your age." Her voice had been sweet, concerned, but something about it rang false, like an actress reading lines she didn't quite believe. Her eyes hadn't matched her smile. I should have seen it then. The way her eyes flickered with something that wasn't quite concern. Was it satisfaction? The way Richard wouldn't hold my gaze for more than a second before looking away, guilt written across his features. But mothers are blind when it comes to their children. We see what we want to see, not what's really there. We make excuses, find explanations, refuse to believe the worst. Inside, I made tea I couldn't drink and sat at the kitchen table. The note spread flat in front of me. The afternoon light slanted through the window, catching dust motes in the air, making them dance like tiny ghosts. Everything looked so ordinary. The photos on the fridge showing Richard at various ages, gap-toothed at 7, graduating high school in his cap and gown, his wedding day with Nicole in white. The dish towel hanging from the oven handle, the one with roosters on it that Tom had bought me as a joke 20 years ago. The scratch in the hardwood floor where I'd dropped a pot 3 years ago and never bothered to fix. My phone buzzed, making me jump. Richard. Coming by for dinner, the text read. Nicole wants to see you. No question mark, no asking if it was convenient, if I was feeling well enough for company, if I'd already eaten. Just a statement of fact, the way he'd been talking to me for the past year. Ever since he married her. Commands disguised as plans, expectations instead of requests. I typed back, not tonight, not feeling well. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. The pause felt loaded, dangerous, like a bomb waiting to explode. Finally, tomorrow then. Not a question, not, is tomorrow better, or, hope you feel better soon. Just tomorrow then. An order. I set the phone down and pressed my palms against my eyes. The headache was starting again, a familiar pressure that had become my constant companion. A sharp pain behind my left eye, spreading across my forehead like fingers pressing into my skull. When did it start getting worse? 3 months ago? 4? Time blurred together when you felt so unwell, when every day was a battle just to get out of bed and act like everything was fine. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, watching shadows from the streetlight outside move across the plaster like dark water. The ceiling fan turned slowly, its chain clicking with each rotation. I replayed every interaction I'd had with Richard and Nicole over the past year. The way they'd pushed me to sign papers I didn't fully understand. Power of attorney, they'd called it. Just in case something happens, Nicole had said, her manicured nails tapping against the folder like drum beats. Red polish, perfectly applied, not a chip or scratch. You know, if you get sick or something, it's just sensible planning. I'd signed because Richard asked me to, because he was my son, and I trusted him with everything I had. Because mothers don't think their children would ever hurt them, betray them, plot against them. I'd signed away my control without reading the fine print, without asking questions, without understanding what I was giving up. The car. They'd been very interested in the car lately. My late husband's pride and joy sat in the garage, covered with a tarp, untouched for 5 years since he passed. A 1967 Shelby GT500, cherry red, in pristine condition. Tom had spent every weekend working on that car, his hands always stained with grease, his face lighting up with joy as he polished the chrome until it shone. I'd kept it because it reminded me of him, of better times, of a man who had loved me, who would never have harmed me, who had protected me until the very end. Ever think about selling it? Nicole had asked last month, running her finger along the hood, leaving a trail in the dust. Must be worth something. A lot, probably. It's not for sale, I'd told her firmly. She'd looked at Richard, something passing between them that I couldn't read. A look of understanding, of conspiracy, of plans being made without my knowledge. Just seems like a waste, sitting here collecting dust. All that value just sitting here when you could use the money, for medical bills or something. Medical bills? Had she known even then that I'd need medical bills? Had she already started poisoning me? Friday came slowly. Each day felt like wading through mud, every movement requiring enormous effort. I called in sick to work. The diner could manage without me for once. The weakness in my limbs had gotten worse, and twice that week I'd nearly collapsed while carrying plates. My manager, Dolores, had noticed. "You look like hell, Mara," she'd said, concern creasing her weathered face. She'd worked at the diner for 30 years, had seen everything. Employees coming in drunk, fights breaking out, people collapsing from exhaustion. "Get yourself checked out. I'm serious. This isn't normal tired." "I am," I told her. "Going to the doctor Friday." "Good. And don't come back until you're better. I mean it." Dr. Lawson's office was quiet when I arrived. Too quiet. The waiting room, usually filled with patients and the murmur of conversation, was empty except for me. The receptionist, usually chatty and warm, barely acknowledged me. She just pointed to the back hallway, her expression carefully neutral, almost frightened. "He's waiting for you. Exam room 3. The doctor looked like he'd aged a decade in 5 days. His hair seemed grayer, the lines around his mouth deeper, his shoulders slumped with the weight of whatever he was about to tell me. He shut the door behind me and locked it. The click of the lock was loud, final, the sound of a door closing on my old life. "Sit down," he said. I sat, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. He pulled out a folder, thick with papers and lab results. His hands were steady now, but his jaw was tight, muscles working beneath the skin. The tests came back. "Mara, you're being poisoned." The words hit me like a physical blow. The room seemed to tilt, the walls closing in, the air becoming too thick to breathe. "What?" "Arsenic. Small doses over an extended period. It's in your system, building up. That's why you've been so sick." He pulled out a chart covered in numbers I couldn't understand, pointing to highlighted sections with a pen that trembled slightly. "If it continues, you'll have organ failure within months, maybe weeks. Your liver is already showing significant damage. Your kidneys, too. See these numbers here? They should be in this range. Yours are way up here." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the exam table, the paper crinkling beneath my fingers, rough against my palms. "How?" "Food, most likely. Drink. Something you consume regularly that someone else has access to." He paused, and the silence stretched between us like a wire pulled taut, ready to snap. "Mara, who prepares your meals? Who has access to your kitchen? Who brings you food or drink?" I thought about the dinners Richard and Nicole brought over twice a week. Always Tuesday and Thursday, like clockwork, never missing a visit. "We're worried about you," Nicole always said, her voice dripping false concern like honey laced with poison. "You need to eat better. You're getting too thin. We can't have you wasting away." Homemade soup in containers she insisted I keep, casseroles covered in foil, her special tea blend that she insisted would help my headaches. The tea. I'd been drinking it every day for 4 months. 3 cups a day, sometimes 4 when the headaches got really bad. She'd said it was a special herbal blend, expensive, imported from some monastery in China. "Only the best for you," she'd said, pressing the tin into my hands. "Drink it regularly. It'll help with everything. Headaches, nausea, fatigue. You'll feel like a new woman." "Oh, God," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I can't report this without your permission," Dr. Lawson said quietly, leaning forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "But you need to stop consuming anything they give you. Today, right now, pour it out, throw it away. Don't eat or drink anything that comes from them. Do you understand me, Mara?" "Nothing." "My son wouldn't." "Mara." He leaned forward, his voice urgent, intense, his eyes boring into mine. "I've seen this before. 15 years ago, another patient. People we love are capable of terrible things when money's involved. Inheritance, property, assets. It turns people into monsters. People who should love us, protect us, suddenly see us as obstacles. And obstacles can be removed. Money. The house was worth $500,000 in this market, maybe more with the way property values had been climbing. And the car, I'd had it appraised years ago, just out of curiosity, just to know. Tom had laughed when the collector told him it could fetch $300,000 at auction, maybe more to the right buyer. Not while I'm still alive, he'd said, laughing, not knowing how prophetic those words would turn out to be. Not while I'm still alive. The phrase echoed in my head like an irreversible fate, like a prophecy unfolding. I drove home on autopilot, my mind racing, spinning in circles like a trapped animal. I needed proof. Suspicion wasn't enough. I needed to hear it from their own mouths, needed concrete evidence that would stand up in court, that would convince the police, that would make people believe me. Because if I was going to accuse my son of trying to murder me, I needed to be absolutely certain, 100% sure. The opportunity came faster than I expected. Richard called that evening. I was sitting in the kitchen, gazing at the pantry where Nicole's tea rested on the shelf, looking harmless in its decorative tin. Adorned with flowers and vines, delicate Chinese characters painted in gold, it looked like something you'd give to someone special, not something you'd use to harm them. "We're coming by tomorrow," Richard said, not asking, telling. His voice had that edge it got when he was stressed, sharp and brittle. "Nicole made your favorite." "I'd rather meet somewhere neutral," I said, testing the waters, wanting to see his reaction. "How about that cafe downtown? The one with the outdoor seating? It's a nice day." A pause. I could hear him breathing, could picture him exchanging looks with Nicole across their kitchen table. I could almost hear her shaking her head, mouthing, "No." "Mom, you know Nicole likes to cook for you. She's made this whole special meal, spent all day on it. She'll be disappointed if you cancel." "I'm not hungry." His voice hardened, losing the pretense of warmth, showing the steel underneath. "We're coming at 6. Be there." He hung up. I stood in my kitchen, phone in hand, and the reality of my situation hit me like a heavy weight settling on my shoulders. My son, my boy, the child I had carried, given birth to and raised, whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose nightmares I had chased away, whose dreams I had supported, was involved in this. Maybe Nicole was manipulating him. Maybe he had been the one to suggest it, but either way, he knew. He knew they were harming me, and he was letting it happen. Probably even aiding in it. Definitely aiding in it. I called my lawyer, Jim Preston. We'd handled Tom's estate together 5 years ago, and I trusted him. He was straightforward, honest, the kind of lawyer who actually cared about his clients instead of just billing hours. "Jim, I need to see you. Today, if possible. Right now, if you can manage it." "What's wrong?" He'd picked up on the urgency in my voice. "I need to change some things. My will, the power of attorney papers I signed, everything. All of it needs to be different." He heard something in my voice, some edge of desperation or fear that made him respond immediately. "Come by in an hour. I'll clear my schedule." Jim's office smelled like old books and coffee, that comforting smell of paper and ink and leather bindings. His secretary showed me in with a concerned look, and Jim stood up from behind his desk, concern written across his face. He was in his 60s, grey-haired and distinguished-looking, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of face that made you want to trust him. He listened to everything without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each word I spoke. I told him about the doctor's note, the poison, the symptoms, Richard and Nicole's interest in my assets, the power of attorney I'd signed, the car, the house, everything. I watched his face change as the pieces fell into place, watched understanding dawn in his eyes, followed by anger and then grim determination. "You realize what you're saying," he finally replied after I finished, setting his pen down carefully. "You're accusing your son of trying to harm you, of plotting against you for financial gain." "I'm stating facts based on medical evidence." He pulled out a legal pad, uncapping a pen with a click. "The doctor can testify to the poisoning, but proving Richard and Nicole are behind it, that's harder without direct evidence. You said you signed power of attorney?" Yes, about 6 months ago. Nicole brought the papers over, said it was standard planning, that everyone should have it. Richard asked me to sign. Then legally, they have significant control over your assets right now. If something happened to you, they'd get everything. The house, the car, my savings. Everything I've worked for my entire life. Jim nodded slowly, writing notes in his careful, precise handwriting. We need to revoke those documents immediately. Today, right now. I'll draw up new papers giving me temporary power of attorney until we sort this out. And we need to change your will completely. Do it, I said firmly. I want them to get nothing. Not the house, not the car, not a single penny, not one thing. What about the car, that Shelby? I'm selling it, as soon as possible. His eyebrows rose. That's a collector's item, Mara, worth a significant amount of money. Your husband restored it himself. Are you sure you want to part with it? I know what it's worth, and I'm going to use every penny of it to make sure I survive this. I need surgery. Dr. Lawson had mentioned it, a procedure that could help flush the toxins from my system faster, repair some of the damage they'd done to my organs. Expensive, not covered by insurance, experimental in some ways, but necessary if I wanted to live. Can you help me find a buyer? Someone legitimate who'll pay fair value? I know a guy, Jim said, already reaching for his phone. Collector, deals in classic cars. He's fair, honest, will give you market value. He's bought pieces for Jay Leno, serious collectors. Let me make some calls right now. We spent 3 hours going through paperwork. My hand ached from signing document after document, each page filled with legal jargon that ultimately came down to one thing. Richard and Nicole would receive nothing. By the time I left, everything had been updated. The power of attorney was revoked. New beneficiaries were listed in my will. My sister's children, whom I rarely saw, but who had never tried to harm me, charities I'd always supported, medical research foundations, anyone but Richard and Nicole. Jim assured me he'd have the car appraised by the end of the week and would find a buyer right away. That night, I moved through my house like an investigator at a crime scene. I poured out every drink, emptied every container, threw away every packaged food item, anything Richard and Nicole might have touched. Juice, milk, cereal, crackers, the soup in the freezer, the casserole in the fridge. All of it went into garbage bags. Wasteful maybe, but I couldn't take the risk. At the back of the pantry, I found Nicole's tea bags, the special blend she had insisted on. The tin was beautiful, decorated with hand-painted flowers, delicate and charming. A gift from a loving daughter-in-law, except it was filled with poison. I bagged them separately, carefully, wearing gloves, like evidence, like the weapon it was. For the police, I whispered to the empty kitchen. The next day, I didn't go to Richard's dinner. I didn't answer their calls. My phone buzzed and buzzed, texts piling up, voicemails accumulating. Mum, where are you? We're worried. Call us back. This isn't funny. The tone shifting from concern to annoyance to anger. I ignored all of it. Instead, I drove to the police station and filed a report. The building was old, institutional, with fluorescent lights that hummed and flickered and made everything look slightly green. The officer who took my statement looked skeptical. He was young, maybe 30, with that combination of boredom and suspicion that comes from dealing with people's problems all day. Probably thought he'd be out solving murders, catching criminals. Instead, he got people like me. Ma'am, you're saying your son is poisoning you? I'm saying someone is, and I have doctor's evidence, test results showing high levels of arsenic in my system. I'm also saying that my son and his wife are the only people who've had consistent access to my food and drink over the past 4 months. That's not proof of anything specific. I know, but I want it on record, in case something happens to me, in case I end up gone and someone needs to investigate. I want there to be a paper trail showing I reported this. He took the report, typing slowly on his computer with 2 fingers, but I could see he didn't believe me. His expression said it all. Just another paranoid old woman seeing conspiracies where there were none. Another attention seeker wasting police time. Another lonely person making up drama. But at least it would be documented. "We'll look into it," he said, in a tone that meant they wouldn't. "Thank you," I said, knowing it was useless but needing to try anyway. Jim called on Wednesday. "I've got a buyer for the car. He's offering $320,000. Cash deal, no questions, can close by Friday if you're willing." My hands trembled holding the phone. More money than I'd seen in my entire life. More than I'd made in years of working at the diner, serving coffee and pancakes to people who barely saw me, who left dollar tips and called me honey. "Tell him yes, today, right now." "Mara, are you absolutely sure? That car was Tom's, his pride and joy. The last piece of him you have. I need to know you won't regret this." "Tom's gone," I said flatly. "I'm not yet, and I'm going to make sure it stays that way." The sale went through on Friday. The collector came to my house with a truck and a briefcase full of money. He was older, 70s maybe, with calloused hands and eyes that lit up when he saw the car. He walked around it slowly, reverently, like it was a piece of art in a museum, like it was something sacred. "Beautiful machine," he said, running his hands over the hood, his voice hushed with respect. "Your husband had excellent taste. This is original paint, original interior, original engine, cherry condition, museum quality. You could get more at auction, you know." "I don't have time for auctions." "Fair enough." He didn't ask why. Maybe he'd seen enough in his life to know when not to pry. I watched them load it onto the truck, that piece of Tom driving away forever. The car Tom had spent countless hours restoring, that he'd loved almost as much as he'd loved me. I felt nothing watching it go. Maybe I should have felt sad, nostalgic, guilty for selling his dream. But all I felt was relief and cold determination. The money was mine now, and it would save my life. That was all that mattered. Survival. Richard called as the truck pulled away, like he had some sixth sense about it, like he could feel his inheritance disappearing. "Mum, where are you? We've been trying to reach you for days. This is getting ridiculous." "I've been busy." "Busy with what?" His voice had an edge, sharp and dangerous. "Nicole's worried. We both are. You're not answering calls. You're avoiding us. You won't let us help you. What's going on? Are you okay?" "I sold the car," I said calmly. Silence, complete, total silence. I could hear him breathing, hear the shock in that silence. Then, "What?" "The Shelby, sold it. $320,000. Cash deal, it's done." I could hear him breathing, fast and harsh, like he'd been running, like he'd been punched in the stomach. "You can't do that. That car belongs to the family. It was Dad's. It should have gone to me. You had no right. It belonged to me. It was left to me in your father's will. And now it's sold. The money's in my account. Every single penny." "Mom!" He was trying to control his voice, but fury leaked through, hot and barely contained, bubbling up from somewhere deep and ugly. "We need to talk, right now. This is insane. You can't just—" "Come by tomorrow," I said. 2:00. We'll talk then. We'll talk about everything." I hung up before he could respond, before he could argue, before I could lose my nerve. I spent that night preparing. Jim had helped me set up a recording device, hidden in the living room behind a picture frame. Small, digital, voice-activated, purchased from a spy shop downtown. "If they admit to anything," he'd said, showing me how it worked, "we'll have proof. Real proof that will stand up in court. Their own words condemning them." I also called Dr. Lawson. "I need that surgery scheduled, as soon as possible, tomorrow if you can manage it." "Mara, it's going to take time to arrange. We need to get you into a specialist, run more tests, get insurance approval." "I have the money now. Whatever it costs, I can pay. Cash, no insurance needed. I'll pay whatever it takes." He was quiet for a moment. I'll make some calls. Pull some strings. Give me until Monday. I know someone, best in the country for this kind of damage. That night, I finally slept without nightmares. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was knowing that I was fighting back, taking control, refusing to be a victim. Richard and Nicole arrived at 2:00 sharp. I watched them pull up from the window, saw them sit in the car for a moment, talking animatedly. Nicole's face was animated, angry, her hands moving as she spoke. Richard looked sick, pale, his face drawn. He kept shaking his head, but she kept talking, kept pushing. When I opened the door, Nicole's smile was brittle, fake, like a mask she'd put on. Richard wouldn't look at me directly, his eyes sliding away whenever I tried to meet them, guilt written all over him. "Mom," he said, moving to hug me. I stepped back, away from his arms. "Let's sit in the living room." They exchanged glances. The recording device was running, capturing everything. "What's going on?" Nicole asked, perching on the edge of the sofa, her posture perfect, controlled. She crossed her legs, smoothed her skirt. "You've been acting so strange lately. We're worried about you." "Have I?" I settled into Tom's old recliner, the one that gave me a clear view of both their faces, that let me watch every expression, every reaction. "Strange how?" "Not answering calls," Richard said, his voice tight, "avoiding us, not letting us see you, and then selling Dad's car without even telling us, without even asking if we wanted it. It was my car to sell." Nicole's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in her cheek. "That car was a family heirloom. Richard's father spent years restoring it. It had sentimental value. You should have at least asked us first. And it was mine when Tom died. Everything was left to me in his will. Not to Richard, to me. I can do what I want with my own property." "But we thought—" Nicole caught herself, her eyes widening slightly as she realized what she'd almost said, almost admitted. "You thought what?" I leaned forward, keeping my voice calm. "That you'd inherit it when I died. That it would be yours. That you were just waiting for me to die so you could have it." The air in the room changed, became charged, electric. Richard shifted uncomfortably, his hands gripping his knees so hard his knuckles went white. "Mum, why would you say that? That's crazy." "Because it's true, isn't it? You've been waiting for me to die, planning for it, counting on it, probably helping it along." Nicole stood up, her face flushing red, anger breaking through the mask. "That's an insane accusation. You sound completely paranoid. Maybe you need to see a doctor, a psychiatrist." "Is it?" I pulled the bag of tea from the side table where I'd placed it that morning. "This is your special blend, Nicole. The one you insisted I drink every day. 3 cups minimum, you said. More if I wanted. You were very insistent about it. Funny thing, I had it tested. Do you know what they found?" Her face went pale, all the color draining out of it like water down a sink. "Arsenic," I said calmly, observing her response. "Small amounts, enough to make me unwell, just enough to take my life gradually over the course of months, so it would appear as natural causes, like an elderly woman simply falling ill and passing away. Very clever, really." Richard was on his feet now, swaying slightly. "Mom, you can't seriously think—" "That's impossible. Nicole would never—" "I know." My voice was steel, cold and hard. "My doctor knows. He has test results. The police know. I filed a report. It's all documented. Test results, medical records, purchase receipts for rat poison. Everything." Nicole recovered first, her expression hardening, the mask coming back but different now, colder, more calculating. "You have no proof we did anything wrong." "Don't I?" I smiled without humor. "You're the only ones who've been giving me food and drink, the only ones who had access to my house, my kitchen. And you're the ones who convinced me to sign power of attorney, the ones who kept asking about the car's value, about the house, about my assets, the ones who stood to inherit everything when I died." "That doesn't prove anything specific." "Richard," I said, cutting her off, turning to face my son. "Look at me. Look at your mother." He did finally, and I saw the guilt written across his face as clear as words on a page. His eyes were red-rimmed, his mouth trembling, sweat beading on his forehead. "Did you know?" I asked softly. "When did you realize what she was doing? From the start, or did it take you some time to figure out that your wife was slowly ending your mother's life?" "I didn't." His voice cracked. "Mum, I never wanted—" "She said it would be quick, that you wouldn't suffer, that—" "Shut up," Nicole snapped at him, her voice sharp as a whip. "Don't say another word." But he couldn't stop, the guilt pouring out of him like water from a broken dam. "She said you were old anyway, that you'd lived your life, that we deserved the money more than some charity, that—" "Shut up," Nicole screamed. She turned to me and the mask was completely gone now, showing the cold calculation beneath, the naked greed, the complete lack of remorse. "You don't understand anything. That house, that car, you were just sitting on them, wasting them, not appreciating what you had. You're just a waitress. You don't need all this. Richard deserves that money. He's your son. He worked hard, and what does he have to show for it? A rented apartment and student loans. Nothing. While you sit in this house worth $500,000, driving to work in a beat-up Honda, while a $300,000 car sits in your garage collecting dust. And I'm his mother, the woman who raised him, the woman who sacrificed everything for him. You're in the way." The words were cold, matter of fact, like she was discussing the weather or what to have for dinner. "You're old, Mara, 58 years old. You've lived your life. You've had your time. Why shouldn't we benefit from what you've built? Why should we have to wait decades for you to die naturally? We have plans, dreams, a future. We need that money now, not 20 years from now." The recording device caught every word, every inflection, every damning syllable. Richard looked sick, his skin pale and clammy, sweat dripping down his face. "Nicole, stop talking. Please, just stop." "Why? She can't prove anything." But uncertainty flickered in her eyes now, doubt creeping in, fear starting to show. I stood up slowly, carefully, my legs steadier than they'd been in months, stronger. "Actually, I can. This entire conversation has been recorded. Everything you just said, everything you're about to say, it's all evidence, every word." Nicole's face went from pale to red, anger flooding through her like lava. "You liar! You set us up." "I revoked the power of attorney," I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart, despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Changed my will completely. You're getting nothing. Not the house, not a penny of my money, not a single thing. And I've filed a police report about the poisoning. It's all documented." "They won't believe you," Nicole said, but her voice shook. "You're just a paranoid old woman. No one will believe this." "They will now." I picked up my phone and dialed Jim's number. "You can listen while I call my lawyer. He's been waiting for my signal. The police are probably already on their way." Richard sank onto the couch, his head in his hands, his whole body shaking. "I'm so sorry, Mum. I'm so sorry. I never wanted this. I swear I never wanted to hurt you." Nicole rounded on him, her face twisted with rage, with panic, with the realization that everything was falling apart. "Don't you dare apologize to her. She's ruining everything. Everything we planned. Everything we worked for." "You ruined it," I said to her, my voice slicing through her panic like a sharp blade. "The moment you decided to harm me, the moment you bought that poison, the moment you put it in my tea." "I want that money," Nicole was shouting now, all pretense gone, her voice shrill and desperate. "We deserve it. You're just a waitress. You don't need all this. The house alone is worth $500,000. That car was worth $300,000. That's almost $1 million total, and you were just sitting on it, just sitting there while we struggled." "Nothing to you now," I finished. "It's over, Nicole." Jim answered on the second ring. I put him on speaker so they could hear. "Jim, they're here. You should send the police now." "Already did," he said, his voice calm and professional. "They're 2 minutes away. Stay on the line with me." Nicole moved toward the door, panic in her eyes, her movements jerky and desperate. But I blocked her path. For someone who'd been poisoned for months, who'd been weak and sick, I felt strong now. Adrenaline, maybe, or just pure determination. Or maybe just the strength that comes from knowing you're right, that you're the victim, that justice is finally coming. You're not leaving. Get out of my way, you old fool. Make me. I'd never been violent in my life, but something fierce rose in me. This woman had tried to murder me, had manipulated my son, had stolen months of my life with her poison, made me weak and sick and afraid, made me think I was dying of natural causes. You're going to face what you did. The sirens were audible now, getting closer, wailing through the quiet afternoon. That beautiful sound of justice approaching. Richard stood, swaying slightly, his face crumpling like paper. Mom, I didn't want this. You have to believe me. Nicole said it would be quick, that you wouldn't suffer much, that it would just look like you got sick and died. She said everyone would think it was natural. She said we'd be together, that we'd have a good life with the money. She said I was in the way. I finished, my voice hard. And you believed her. You chose her over your mother. You chose money over me. You chose to let me die. His face crumpled. I'm sorry. God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. Sorry isn't enough. Sorry doesn't undo months of poison. Sorry doesn't give me back the time you stole. Sorry doesn't heal the damage to my liver and kidneys. The police knocked, loud and authoritative. 3 sharp raps that sounded like judgment. I opened the door to find 2 officers, hands on their weapons, faces serious and alert. Mara Martin? One asked. He was older, grey at the temples, with the bearing of someone who'd seen everything. His nameplate read, Detective Barnes. That's me. These are the people I told you about, the ones who've been poisoning me. We'll need to hear that recording, he said. I played them the recording, watching Nicole's face as her own words condemned her, watching the colour drain from her cheeks as she heard her voice, clear and cold. You're in the way. Why shouldn't we benefit? I want that money. The female officer, younger with sharp eyes and her hand on her cuffs, pulled them out. Nicole Martin, you're under arrest for attempted murder. This is entrapment, Nicole screamed as they moved toward her, her voice rising to a shriek. She tricked me. She set me up. This isn't legal. You can't do this. You poisoned her, Detective Barnes said flatly, no sympathy in his voice. That's not entrapment, that's a confession. You admitted it on tape. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. They read her rights while she cursed and struggled, fighting against the handcuffs, her face twisted with rage and fear. She looked like a completely different person now. Gone was the sweet daughter-in-law, the concerned wife. This was the real Nicole, ugly and desperate and vicious. Richard stood frozen, watching his wife being taken away, tears streaming down his face. Nicole, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. This is your fault, she screamed at him as they pulled her toward the door. You were supposed to be strong. You were supposed to protect me. You weak, pathetic. The male officer turned to Richard, cutting off her tirade. Sir, we'll need you to come down to the station for questioning. Am I under arrest? Not yet, but you admitted to knowledge of the crime. You knew she was poisoning your mother and did nothing to stop it. You'll need to come with us. Richard looked at me, his eyes pleading, desperate, full of tears and regret. Mom, please. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I could stop her. I thought... Go with them, I said. I felt nothing looking at him. No anger, no love, no pity. Just emptiness where my son used to be. A void where love had been. You made your choice when you let her poison me. When you watched me get sicker and did nothing. They led him out, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Nicole was still screaming from the patrol car, her voice muffled but audible. The house fell silent when the doors closed, so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat, loud in my ears like a drum. I sat in Tom's recliner and let the shaking start. It rolled through me in waves: shock, relief, grief, triumph, anger, sadness. I'd won. I'd caught them. I'd survived. But God, at what cost? My son, my only child, the baby I'd carried and birthed and loved. Jim arrived 20 minutes later, letting himself in with the key I'd given him. "You did it," he said simply, sitting down across from me. "You actually did it." "I did. The recording is solid. Her confession, Richard's admission, they're done. The prosecutor will have no trouble making a case. This is as open and shut as it gets." "What happens now?" I asked, suddenly exhausted. "Nicole will be charged with attempted murder, possibly conspiracy, poisoning with intent to harm, and perhaps a few other offences. Richard will likely face charges as an accomplice, though he might get a deal if he testifies against her. Either way, neither of them will see a penny from you. I've made sure of that." I nodded. The practical details felt distant, almost insignificant compared to the emotional devastation. My son had tried to harm me. "The surgery," Jim continued. "Dr. Lawson called while I was on my way over. He's scheduled you for next week, Thursday morning. He found a specialist at Johns Hopkins, one of the best in the country for arsenic poisoning cases." "That fast?" I pulled some strings, called in favors from law school buddies, made it clear this was a matter of survival. He leaned forward, his expression softening. "Mara, you're going to make it through this. You're going to heal, and you're going to live your life. They don't get to take that from you. You won." But the victory felt hollow. The weeks before the trial passed in a blur of medical appointments, lawyer meetings, and police interviews. The prosecutor, a sharp woman in her 40s named Elizabeth Hoffman, walked me through everything multiple times. What would happen in court, what questions they'd ask, how to handle cross-examination from Nicole's defense attorney. "The recording is your strongest piece of evidence," she said during one of our meetings, her office neat and organized, files stacked precisely. Nicole's own words condemning her. But we need more. We need to establish a pattern, show the jury that this wasn't just talk, it was action. Premeditated, calculated murder. They found the receipts. 3 different hardware stores over 6 months, small purchases of rat poison, always paid in cash, always at different stores to avoid drawing attention. Security footage showed Nicole making the purchases, her face clearly visible on the camera, with no attempt to hide. They uncovered internet searches on her laptop. How much arsenic is dangerous, arsenic poisoning symptoms, how to make a passing seem natural, undetectable poisons, inheritance laws. She wasn't as smart as she thought, Elizabeth said, spreading the evidence across her desk like playing cards. Photos, receipts, printouts of search histories. She thought small purchases would go unnoticed. She thought deleting her browser history would be enough. But digital footprints don't disappear that easily. Nothing really disappears anymore. Richard was offered a plea deal. 5 years in exchange for testifying against Nicole, for admitting his role as an accomplice who knew about the poisoning but did nothing to stop it. 5 years, I said to Jim, my anger rising sharp in my throat, for helping harm his mother. He's cooperating. The system rewards that. And honestly, Mara, without his testimony, proving Nicole's guilt becomes harder. He can explain how she manipulated him, how she made the tea, how she insisted on bringing it to you, how she researched the poison. He's the insider witness. The prosecution needs him. I don't want to see him. You won't have to. He'll testify, but you don't have to be in the courtroom for that part if you don't want to. It's your choice. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to see Richard on the stand, wanted to watch him admit what he'd done, wanted to see him face the consequences. But a larger part couldn't bear to look at him, couldn't stand the thought of seeing his face. I don't want to be there. I can't. The trial started on a cold Monday in November. The courthouse was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, people who'd followed the case in the news. The woman poisoned by her own family. It had become a media sensation, a cautionary tale, water cooler conversation across the country. I sat in the front row behind the prosecutor's table, Jim beside me for support and protection from the cameras. Nicole was led in, wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hands cuffed in front of her. She looked thinner than I remembered, her face harder, aged by months in jail. When she saw me, her eyes filled with pure hatred, undiluted and poisonous. The jury was selected over 2 days. Elizabeth was meticulous, asking each potential juror about their relationship with their own families, whether they could be objective, whether they could convict based on evidence, even if the crime seemed unthinkable, whether they could imagine their own children betraying them. On the 3rd day, the trial began in earnest. Elizabeth's opening statement was crushing. She depicted a scene of greed, manipulation, and a calculated attempt to harm. She presented the jury with photos of me from 6 months ago. Thin and frail, my skin yellow, my eyes sunken, looking 20 years older than I was. Then she showed photos from last week, where I appeared healthier after stopping the poison and receiving treatment. The contrast was striking. "This is what arsenic poisoning looks like," she said, pointing to the before photo with a laser pointer. "And this is what survival looks like when the poison stops, when a victim fights back, when justice intervenes." Nicole's lawyer, a middle-aged man named Douglas Frencher with an expensive suit and tired eyes, tried to establish reasonable doubt. His opening statement suggested I was a bitter, controlling mother-in-law who'd never accepted Nicole into the family, who'd been jealous of her son's marriage. That I'd orchestrated this entire scenario to frame her, possibly even poisoning myself in small doses to make it look believable. "My client is innocent," he said, his voice ringing through the courtroom with practiced conviction. "And the evidence will show that Mara Martin is a woman scorned, angry that her son chose his wife over his mother, a controlling parent who couldn't let go." On day 4, the medical evidence became the focus. Dr. Lawson took the stand, explaining the test results and revealing the dangerously high levels of arsenic in my system, along with the damage to my organs that would have been fatal within weeks. He also testified about the note he'd given me, detailing why he had been so concerned for my safety. "I'd seen a case like this before," he said quietly, his voice heavy with old grief. 15 years ago. A woman being slowly poisoned by her husband for insurance money. By the time we figured it out, it was too late. She died before we could save her. I didn't want that to happen to Mara. I couldn't let it happen again. Douglas tried to shake his testimony on cross-examination, suggesting that Dr. Lawson had jumped to conclusions, that there could be other explanations for the arsenic in my system. Environmental exposure, workplace contamination, accidental ingestion. Could Mrs. Martin have been exposed to arsenic through her work environment? She works at a diner, correct? No, Dr. Lawson said firmly, not budging an inch. The pattern of exposure was consistent with regular, repeated ingestion over months. Not environmental exposure, not accidental, and the timing matched exactly with when she started consuming the tea provided by the defendant. The correlation is undeniable. But you can't prove the tea was the source with absolute certainty, can you, Doctor? Actually, we can. The tea bags Mrs. Martin saved and brought to the police tested positive for lethal levels of arsenic, pure arsenic trioxide mixed with the tea leaves. That's not speculation, that's scientific fact. Douglas sat down, his face tight with frustration. Day 5 brought the forensic evidence. A toxicologist from the state crime lab explained how arsenic works, how it accumulates in the body, and how it causes organ damage over time. She presented charts, graphs, and timelines that perfectly matched my illness with Nicole's visits. The defendant visited Mrs. Martin every Tuesday and Thursday for 4 months, she testified, using a pointer on a large chart. And Mrs. Martin's symptoms consistently worsened within 24 to 48 hours of each visit. This pattern repeated 16 times. That's not coincidence. That's causation. The jury leaned forward, taking notes, their faces serious. Day 6 was the hardest. They played the recording. My voice filled the courtroom, amplified through speakers. Did you know? When did you figure out what she was doing? Richard's broken response. I didn't, Mom. I never wanted. And then Nicole, cold and clear. You don't understand. That house, that car. You were just sitting on them, wasting them. Richard deserves that money. My voice again. And I'm his mother. Nicole's response. The words that would seal her fate. You're in the way. You're old, Mara. You've lived your life. Why shouldn't we benefit from what you've built? And later, shouting, desperate, I want that money. We deserve it. The courtroom was silent when the recording ended. Several jurors were staring at Nicole with obvious disgust. One woman was wiping her eyes. A man in the back row shook his head slowly. Douglas tried to argue that I'd manipulated Nicole into saying those things, that it was entrapment, that the recording was taken out of context, that emotions were running high. But Elizabeth was ready with case law and precedent. Your Honor, the defense keeps using the word entrapment, but entrapment requires law enforcement to induce someone to commit a crime they wouldn't otherwise commit. Mrs. Martin is not law enforcement. She's a victim who recorded a conversation in her own home to protect herself. And as the jury just heard, she didn't put words in Nicole Martin's mouth. She simply asked questions, and the defendant freely confessed to attempted murder. The judge agreed, overruling the objection. Day 7 brought Richard to the stand. I'd left the courtroom by then, sitting in a small witness room down the hall, unable to watch, unable to breathe. But Jim stayed, and he told me later what happened. How Richard had walked to the stand with his head down, unable to meet anyone's eyes, looking like he'd aged 20 years. How he'd sworn to tell the truth in a voice barely above a whisper. Elizabeth questioned him methodically, establishing the timeline, the relationship, Nicole's growing obsession with my assets, and her increasing frustration with waiting for a natural inheritance. When did you first learn your wife was poisoning your mother? Elizabeth asked. About 2 months in, Richard said, his voice shaking. I noticed Mom was getting sicker, losing weight, looking terrible, and Nicole seemed pleased about it, almost happy. One night, around midnight, I got up for water and saw her in the kitchen adding something to the tea, a white powder. When I asked what it was, she said it was just extra herbs, special ingredients. But I didn't believe her. Did you confront her? Yes. The next day. She told me it was rat poison, small doses of arsenic. She said Mom would just seem to get sick and die naturally, that no one would ever know, that we'd inherit everything and finally have the life we deserved. And what did you say to that? Richard's voice cracked completely. I told her to stop. I said it was crazy, that I couldn't be part of harming my mother, that it was wrong. She said if I didn't help her, if I told anyone, she'd leave me. Take everything. Destroy me. She said she'd tell the police I forced her into it, that I manipulated her. She said I was weak, that I didn't deserve her if I couldn't do this one thing. She said my mother had lived long enough. So you helped her. I didn't help directly. I just didn't stop her. I knew what was happening every Tuesday and Thursday when we brought food over, and I let it continue because I was afraid of losing Nicole. I was weak. I was a coward. I chose my wife over my mother. Douglas cross-examined him aggressively, trying to establish that Richard was lying to save himself, that his testimony was bought with a plea deal, that he was the real mastermind trying to pin everything on his wife. But Richard stuck to his story, and his guilt was obvious to everyone in the courtroom. His pain was real. You're testifying against your wife to save your own skin, aren't you? Douglas demanded. I'm testifying because my mother nearly lost her life, Richard shot back, tears streaming down his face. Because I helped Nicole try to hurt her, and I'll never forgive myself for that. Never. I don't care about the deal. I deserve prison. I deserve worse. Day 8 brought the hardware store employees. 3 different clerks who remembered Nicole, who confirmed she'd purchased rat poison multiple times over 6 months. One had even asked what she needed so much poison for. She said she had a serious rodent problem, the clerk testified, a young man with acne scars. Said the rats kept coming back, that she needed to deal with a whole nest. I remember thinking it was strange, a young woman like that buying so much poison, but I figured she knew what she was doing. I wish I'd reported it now. Day 9 was the digital forensics expert. He walked the jury through Nicole's laptop, showing her search history, her deleted files, her extensive research into poisoning. The screen projections showed search after search, each one more incriminating. The defendant searched for information about arsenic poisoning 37 times over a 3-month period. He testified, adjusting his glasses. She researched harmful doses, symptoms, detection methods, how long it takes to harm someone. She even looked up cases of people who'd been caught poisoning family members, presumably to learn from their mistakes and avoid detection. Douglas objected repeatedly, arguing that internet searches weren't proof of action, that lots of people looked up morbid things online, but the judge overruled him each time. The searches show intent, the judge said firmly. Combined with the other evidence, they establish a clear pattern of premeditation. Overruled. Day 10 was my turn to testify. Elizabeth had prepared me for this, but nothing could really prepare you for sitting in that chair, under those lights, with everyone staring at you. With Nicole staring at you, her eyes burning with hatred so intense it felt physical. Elizabeth walked me through my story gently but thoroughly. The illness, the doctor's note, the realization that I was being poisoned, the pain of discovering my own son was involved, the fear of dying alone and forgotten. "How did you feel when you realized what they were doing?" Elizabeth asked. "Betrayed," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me, churning like a storm. "Terrified, angry, heartbroken. I spent 32 years raising Richard, giving up everything for him, my youth, my career, my own dreams, and he repaid me by helping his wife harm me for money, for a house and a car. Did you ever consider not fighting back, just accepting your fate?" "No, never. They wanted me to die quietly, to just disappear so they could take what was mine. I refused to give them that satisfaction. I refused to die for their convenience." Douglas's cross-examination was brutal and personal. He tried to paint me as vindictive, controlling, manipulative, a mother who'd never let go, who'd driven Nicole to desperation with constant interference. "Isn't it true that you never approved of your son's marriage to Nicole?" "I had concerns," I admitted honestly. Nicole seemed more interested in what Richard could give her than in Richard himself, but I kept those concerns to myself. I didn't interfere. "You never expressed them to your son?" "Not until after I discovered she was poisoning me, and at that point, it seemed relevant." "Isn't it possible you misunderstood that recording? That you took Mrs. Martin's words out of context? That she was just venting frustration, not admitting to a crime?" I looked directly at Nicole, then back at Douglas. She said I was in the way, that I had lived my life and should be gone so they could have my money. She admitted wanting me gone. What context makes that acceptable? What context makes poisoning someone justified? He had no answer to that. Day 11 brought the closing arguments. Elizabeth was commanding and fervent, her voice filled with conviction and righteous indignation. She went through every piece of evidence carefully, constructing a case so airtight that doubt appeared impossible. The arsenic in my system, the poison in the tea, the receipts, the internet searches, the recording, Richard's testimony, it all led to one undeniable conclusion. Nicole had tried to harm me for money. "The defendant is guilty," Elizabeth said, her voice ringing through the courtroom like a bell. "Guilty of attempted harm, guilty of conspiracy, guilty of poisoning with intent to cause severe damage." She bought the poison knowing what it would do. She prepared it, mixing it with tea leaves. She gave it to the victim repeatedly over 4 months, watching her deteriorate, watching her suffer. And when confronted, she didn't deny it. She didn't show remorse. She justified it. She said the victim was in the way, that her life was worth less than money, less than a house, less than a car. She paused, looking at each juror in turn, making eye contact. Mara Martin almost died because of this defendant's greed. The only reason she's alive today is because she was smart enough, brave enough, and strong enough to fight back. Because a good doctor recognized the symptoms. Because she refused to be a victim. Don't let the defendant escape justice because she failed to complete her crime. Attempted murder is still murder, and Nicole Martin deserves to be held accountable for what she did. Douglas's closing argument was weaker, grasping at straws, his voice lacking the conviction of Elizabeth's. He argued that the prosecution's case was based on circumstantial evidence, that there was reasonable doubt that I'd manipulated the situation to frame Nicole out of spite and jealousy. My client made some unfortunate statements, he admitted, unable to deny the recording. Statements made under duress, while being recorded without her knowledge by someone she thought she could trust. But statements aren't actions. Words aren't crimes. And the prosecution hasn't definitively proven beyond all doubt that Nicole Martin poisoned Mara Martin. They've proven that someone did. But who administered the poison? Could it have been Richard, acting alone, trying to frame his wife? Could Mara Martin have done it herself for sympathy and attention? We don't know with absolute certainty. And when you don't know, when there's any doubt at all, you must acquit. But his voice lacked conviction. Even he seemed to know it was over. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 42 minutes. When they came back, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. Jim squeezed my hand as the jury filed in, their faces serious and set, unreadable. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. The forewoman stood. She was an older woman, maybe 60, with kind eyes and a firm jaw. "We have, Your Honor. On the count of attempted murder in the first degree, how do you find the defendant?" "We find the defendant Nicole Martin guilty." The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. Nicole screamed, her voice shrill and desperate, like an animal caught in a trap. "No, this is wrong. She set me up. This isn't fair." The judge slammed his gavel repeatedly. "Order! I will have order in this court." "On the count of conspiracy to commit murder, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the count of poisoning with intent to cause harm, how do you find?" "Guilty." Nicole was sobbing now, her face buried in her hands, her whole body shaking. Douglas was trying to calm her, his hand on her shoulder, but she was beyond reason, beyond control, screaming that it wasn't fair, that I'd tricked her, that the jury was wrong, that she'd appeal. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later, then gavelled the session closed. Those 2 weeks crawled by like years. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep properly, couldn't think about anything except what sentence Nicole would receive. Elizabeth assured me it would be significant. Attempted murder in the first degree carried a maximum of 25 years, and, with the other charges and the aggravating factors, Nicole could be looking at decades in prison. "She showed no remorse throughout the trial," Elizabeth said during our final meeting. "Even on the stand, she never apologized, never showed regret, never admitted wrongdoing. The judge will take that into account. It's a major factor in sentencing." Sentencing day arrived cold and grey. The courtroom was packed again, even more crowded than during the trial. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Justice, finally served after weeks of testimony and evidence. Nicole was brought in, her face pale and drawn, dark circles under her eyes. She'd lost significant weight during the trial, her cheekbones sharp, her eyes hollow. But when she looked at me, those eyes still burned with undiluted hatred. The judge reviewed the case, the evidence, the jury's verdict, Then he turned to Nicole, his expression stern. Nicole Martin, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers of attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, and poisoning with intent to cause harm. These are some of the most serious offences in our legal system, crimes that violate the very core of what it means to be human. The trust we place in those closest to us, especially family members. You betrayed that trust in the most fundamental and reprehensible way imaginable. Nicole stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched tight. The evidence presented at trial shows a pattern of calculated, premeditated action over many months. You researched arsenic poisoning extensively. You purchased the poison from multiple sources over half a year. You prepared it carefully and administered it to the victim repeatedly, watching her grow progressively sicker while pretending to care about her well-being. And when confronted with your actions, when given the opportunity to show remorse, you showed none. Instead, you justified your behavior, claiming the victim was in the way of your financial goals. You valued money over human life. He paused, letting the words sink in, the courtroom absolutely silent. The victim impact statement submitted by Mrs. Martin is one of the most heartbreaking I've read in my 30 years on the bench. She describes months of suffering, of not understanding why her body was failing, of the profound betrayal she felt upon learning her own family was responsible. She describes the fear of dying, the anger at being viewed as an obstacle rather than a person, a mother, a human being, and she describes the enormous strength it took to fight back, to gather evidence, to stand up for herself when everyone she loved had turned against her. Nicole's lawyer stood slowly. Your Honor, I'd like to address the court before sentencing. Proceed, Counselor. Your Honor, my client has had time to reflect on her actions during her incarceration. She understands the severity of what she's been convicted of, and while she maintains that circumstances and desperation pushed her to make terrible choices, she acknowledges that her actions caused great harm. We ask the court for leniency, for a sentence that allows for eventual rehabilitation and redemption. My client is only 28 years old. She has her whole life ahead of her. The judge looked at Nicole. Does the defendant wish to address the court before I impose sentence? Nicole stood slowly. For a brief moment, I thought she might actually apologize, might show some shred of humanity or remorse. But when she spoke, her voice was cold and defiant. I did what I thought I had to do, she said, her voice steady now, almost proud. Mara had everything while we had nothing. She was sitting on a fortune while we struggled to pay rent. She was selfish, hoarding wealth she didn't even use. I don't expect anyone to understand, but I'm not sorry for wanting a better life. I'm only sorry I failed. The courtroom went absolutely silent. Even Douglas looked shocked, his mouth hanging open. Several jurors shook their heads in disbelief. The judge's expression hardened, his face turning to stone. You're not sorry for attempting murder. You're sorry you got caught. There's a profound difference, Mrs. Martin, and it's a difference that matters greatly in sentencing. He picked up his gavel, the sound of it lifting seeming to fill the entire room. Nicole Martin, on the count of attempted murder in the first degree, I sentence you to 25 years in state prison. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder, I sentence you to 15 years, to run consecutively. On the count of poisoning with intent to cause harm, I sentence you to 10 years, also to run consecutively. That's a total of 50 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for 40 years. The gavel came down with a crack that echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot, like thunder, like the sound of a door slamming shut forever. Nicole's scream was inhuman, a sound of pure rage and despair and disbelief. No, you can't do this. 50 years? I'll die in prison. I'll be 78. This isn't justice. This is murder. Guards moved quickly to restrain her as she fought, thrashing violently against their grip, her face contorted with fury. Her eyes found mine across the courtroom, and the hatred in them was so pure, so intense, that I actually recoiled. "This is your fault," she shrieked at me, spittle flying from her mouth. "You did this. You destroyed my life. You ruined everything. I hope you rot. I hope you die alone and miserable and forgotten. I hope every day of your pathetic life you remember what you did to me. I hope." The guards dragged her bodily from the courtroom, her screams echoing down the hallway, bouncing off the marble walls, until a heavy door slammed and cut them off mid-shriek. The silence that followed was deafening. The judge looked directly at me, his expression softening slightly. "Mrs. Martin, I want you to know that justice has been served here today. This defendant tried to take your life for money, and she will pay dearly for that crime. I hope you can find peace now and live the rest of your life without fear." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat, unable to process what had just happened. Elizabeth turned to me, smiling with satisfaction. "It's over. She's going away for decades. You're safe now, completely safe." Jim squeezed my shoulder firmly. "You did it, Mara. You won. You survived, and you won." And I was alive, healthy again, recovering more each day thanks to the surgery paid for with the car money. Free to live whatever life I chose, without fear, without poison, without people plotting to take my life for inheritance money.